Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Deep Thoughts. I thought today's episode might be valuable because it's something that comes up a lot, I think, in our own personal thoughts, but we don't really bring it up to other people. So today's episode is also dedicated to one of our listeners. Her name is Val Miller. She made a really interesting comment. She watched the Evolution 2 episode and commented something to the effect of, yet another disaster episode. I literally called my friends and told them I got this comment, and everybody laughed on the other side. It was hilarious. And that just brings up something that is the episode title, which is Satisfying Everyone, or Satisfying the World. And because it's a tall order that I don't think we should try to do. So right off the bat, should you try to satisfy the world? My answer is going to be a little bit more firm than most folks. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The second you care about what other people think is the second that you cease to become who you should become, and you run off and become some crazy, bizarre person that you don't even know who the person is. Well, we're going to go through it because I want to make sure you understand what I believe about the subject matter, see if we're on the same page. You may have a separate angle that causes you to try and please the world. I've seen, obviously, in my own life and caring about the world. We're going to talk about the dopamine switch and the chemical programming that comes with satisfying another person and how instantly addictive that is. We'll talk about, random people, your lovers, your children, and perhaps your relatives. But then I've seen those individuals, all those roles, just living life as you have too, watching them try to satisfy the world. And the peaks and valleys that come with that, the time wasted in being alive and trying to do that. And then we have celebrities. Celebrities are hilarious with this because some of them, oh my God, there's one foul comment about them. They are literally crying for days and trying to adjust and apologize and virtue signal, all this other crap. And then there's the most popular celebrities in the world who could give a fuck what you think. And that's why you like them. Because it doesn't smell and taste and sound like everything else. Like, oh my God, this person's pandering to me again. Social media has absolutely amplified the psychoses of trying to satisfy the world. And it's taken it from a celebrity level where what they used to say was that, and Jack Nicholson said it perfectly in the Vivian Kubrick's making of The Shining. He said that an average big-time celebrity will meet in 1 year the amount of people that you will meet your entire lifetime. But with social media, most citizens of the world who obsess on that stuff will catch up with a celebrity fairly quickly. Think of every Instagram account you've ever seen where it's a beautiful girl who works out at a gym. And it's just, can I get a bunch of slobbering guys to look at my feed, and then I'm going to get some sponsorship. And some of them have training courses, some have beautiful before and afters, and some are wonderful people. I think the legit people that work out, you can make your choice of whether you like that kind of content. The other half of it is, your seedier folks that are out there texting you that if you come to their special channel, you can buy time with them and watch them do things. It's a little bit different tense. But social media has turned people into people that they would never be otherwise. So let's talk about it. Obviously, the first perspective that's probably the most detailed is any one of us talking about our own personal experience with satisfying other people. Why are we addicted to it? Why does it just happen? Well, when we're little kids, it's a primal instinct to satisfy your parents because they control everything in your life. And I'm not saying be a bad person or be a bad kid. By no means. You can be yourself and not be a jerk. You can be yourself and obey the rules You can get clever like Captain Kirk, and you can skate between the rules, you know. One of the big things I had raising my child is that a lot of my friends would come in and tell me stories about how their kid would get clever and get around rules. And some of them would get, very few, but they were acidic enough that I was like, damn, what's your issue, man? But I found a way to get them to relax a little bit. But one of them was that, you know, some parents get completely terrified, or they get terrified that their kid's going to keep going down this road and breaking rules and become a huge problem, end up in prison. Now, more of that has to do with the culture around your child. You know, they're surrounded by people that are constantly trying to put guns in their hands or tell them they're not men if they don't kill somebody. You know, you got to move. That's what you got to do. Who cares if you go from one bad place to another bad place? Just keep going until you don't have that influence on your children. But the idea is, I thought when I started seeing my kid get clever, because she always wiggled between the rules most of the time, I thought, oh my God, this kid's going to do really well in life because she's clever. She's smart. She's witty. She knows how not to break the rules, but she knows how to get what she wants. You know, desire will make your brain think of all kinds of things, right? How can I get that thing I can't really have, you know? How can I buy that thing I don't really have money for? And so I just started saying, well, that's healthy growth. My kid's showing healthy signs of a healthy mind, and it's being beyond trivial. It is being clever. Clever is just a great thing. A clever velociraptor is a very interesting thing, right? I mean, clever animals, and, you know, it's like we have videos all the time of cats and dogs and raccoons and all these things. Like the possum that walks on my fence over there, getting clever, and we love it. But when we're kids, we are susceptible to chemical reactions in our brains that we don't really understand. Well, we don't understand it at all unless you have a prodigy child and you're teaching them this content. But dopamine's a huge, powerful force in the brain. It's why everyone gets addicted to anything you get addicted to. Watching a TV show, gambling, you know, having sex, whatever. It's the dopamine drop in your brain that will literally control you. And that's why quitting addiction of any kind is so rough on the system, because you literally, your body pouts. It transmits, in place of that algorithm of dopamine dropping, it transmits pain, trying to cause you to go get more dopamine. Which is why you got to be high on life, folks. Now, I will say I have one strategic benefit. Maybe I have two strategic benefits of becoming who I was in life, and it only occurred to me in the last few years, which is, one, I was an only child. Didn't mean I didn't have relatives and tons of friends around me, but I went home to a house with just me in there and my parents. The second benefit was that my parents were swept away by the 70s and the re-engineering of society to introduce a level of narcissism to depopulate. And they bid it hook, line, and sinker. When I asked my mom once why I didn't have any brothers and sisters, she said, well, we couldn't afford them. Seriously. Oh, and all those other neighborhood kids are living in palaces somewhere? Nah, the whole algorithm for my parents was me. And so they left me alone. I was by myself doing my own thing all the time. That turned out to be a huge benefit. Because in place of emulating somebody else, I was just myself. I had to listen to my own thoughts. I've got a good friend of mine. I've mentioned him once before, not by name, but he lives here with me in California here, and he loves hiking. And so one of the things, he drives really long distances to get to these really cool places, and he'll just all by himself. He just hikes around. And he told me, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, he said, you know, what's really pissing me off is I go out there to hike and I see people wearing headsets, listening to, you know, really loud music, which, one, interrupts his experience, but two, he goes, they can't, it's his impression, and I think he's probably correct, at least to some double-digit percentage degree. He said they can't afford to listen to their own brain. Here they are in the most beautiful landscapes of Southern California, and they can't just sit and listen to the nature. He goes, you know why these people get eaten by mountain lions? He goes, they can't hear them coming. So it's like kind of going to a concert and then putting headset in and listening to a different band while you're watching the one on stage. Hey, take in where you are, or don't go. Why go anywhere if you're just going to blank it out with, some other soundtrack to your life, right? Now, of course, if you lived, there's exceptions. If you live next to a canyon and you've seen it a million times and you have done that walk 50 times, 100 times or more, it's a jogging path for you. It's, it's not so brilliant to you, right? But I think he had a point. And because we are now in this short attention span theater where it's get on social media, really social media is like 95% of everyone's life, and the other 5% is trying to create bullshit pictures to prove to the world how great your life is, so then again, you satisfy other people. But the other thing about my life, and I didn't realize this for a very long time, was that I always gravitated to, I guess it'd be two species. First, I think, as far as entertainers in my life, the band Kiss when I was a kid, I just loved the fact that they were totally different. They put makeup on and the music was amazing and just the world loved them, and they were never jerks. They never beat their wives or killed anybody. Like, most of the rappers these days have got to have that in their record. Otherwise, they're not cool. But everyone was cool. And then, believe it or not, I've mentioned this several times, but, I bumped into Prince performing on Saturday Night Live. It was the famous episode. One of the actors said the F-bomb on stage and got fired the next day. And then very short after that, slightly before that, I guess, I found Adam Ant. And so I ended up gravitating towards these entertainers that were sort of singletons. Prince especially, right? Adam Ant had a whole band that helped him do his thing, but of course there's just that centerpiece character. You're coming to see that dude. And, Prince was a little bit more, funky and deep with his grooves, whereas Adam Ant was creating, pirate punk music, which no one in the world will ever replicate. But what that kind of taught me was that you can build your own persona. It's not really important with what they do. I watch Adam Ant in the video Goody Two Shoes, and I almost want to turn inside out. Again, that guy, I think, regrets having to perform that song as much as he does. I watched him do it in San Francisco Live, and I just watched him cringe on stage going, do I really have to do this song? And he tried to, do a Trent Reznor version of it, but it's still Goody Two Shoes, right? Anyway, good for him for making all the money from that song, at least. But it was always this study of the self. How am I going to entertain myself? How am I going to do this? And in the 70s and 80s, especially in the 70s, the whole game was to go to your house, figure out your shtick, figure out how you look, figure out how you do your hair, figure out what kind of clothing you wore. And of course, I couldn't really take advantage of a lot of that. But when I was a kid, I would move to new neighborhoods constantly. And so, if for whatever reason, I was just a really chill kid, and so I didn't, really attract bad stuff around me. The bad kids wanted to be my friends just as much as the good kids, and, you kind of change just a little bit for each one of the groups. But I would typically very quickly become the leader of the group, and, we used to raise hell and do all kinds of stuff as little kids. But the funny thing is, I was with the guy today at the Smoke Lounge, and he said something pretty profound, which we all kind of know, and it sort of dovetails into my Playground Wisdom episode, which I'm very proud of. But he said, school for kids is a microcosm of how the world works. With your authority figures over you and the chaos down at your level, and you got to deal with all the emotions of some guy wants to beat you up over there, some chick wants to kiss you over there, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just really the ecosystem of the world on a micro level. And I thought about it, I said, man, you're totally right. And so it's important when you think about why, if you're really into like pleasing the planet, or you're not, and you're super strong and you're kind of inquisitive of like, how the hell did I get here, to the point where I never gave a crap about what anyone thought. You have to look at your childhood. You have to figure out the circles of life. How many brothers and sisters do you have? Now, I know friends that have 8 brothers and sisters, And they are the most individual kind of people on planet Earth because they would let their siblings go out and entertain the family while they chilled out in their room. And they got all the same stuff I got. But what ended up happening for me is that getting moved around a lot was actually very healthy because, boy, you got to get your constitution down. I mean, if someone's moving you from one sweet little town to another sweet little town, you won't know anything about what I'm talking about. But if you get moved around to some pretty neighborhoods that are rough, you can get rough neighborhoods that are rough. I mean, I got a bunch of buddies who have really grown up in some tough neighborhoods, and they're 50 times, more individualistic. My God, say that 10 times than I am. And so I look up to their sort of carefree nature. But the reason why we all kind of gravitate to each other is that we just we're our own man, as they say. And of course, there's the female version of that as well. But by the time I got to high school, my God, I was my own dude. I dressed my own way. Anybody came with me to, like, the runs that you do when you live in a little tiny town 100 miles from any big city is that you drive for 2 hours to the big city. You go to your whatever the place. You get your shoes from that place, your pants from that place, your leather jacket from that, and your glasses there. You're looking at everything all over the place. You watch TV a little differently because you're trying to figure out what everyone's doing in the coolest places on earth. And then you try to figure out how your hair grows on your head and try to figure out how it's going to work for you. And you experiment at home. You develop skills. You don't just develop skills that are aimed at a career. You develop social skills because you have to stick out. By being moved around a lot, you want to meet people quick to kind of like rebuild your world as quickly as possible. So say you live in one town and you're indigenous to that's where you're born or raised for the most part. Hey man, you went to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. But if you get moved, then you're back to zero. And how long is it going to take for you to replace all those friends from a previous location? Well, you're going to need to be interesting, charismatic, a good guy. You're not going to be making any friends, crapping on people and taking advantage of people. And so I would work hard to ramp that up as quick as possible. And it worked, When you grow up, it's not necessarily moving from town to town. It's going from job to job. And so you're trying to, again, ramp up your allies and figure out, where the company is at a particular point, how you can help, whatever it is, right? But the whole thing about satisfying people is sort of an out-of-body experience that you start having. And I think it's extremely unhealthy. So how many times have you heard the phrase, be true to yourself? What does that mean? That could mean a lot of things. What is truth? Truth is this giant concept. It can have anything in it that you could possibly put in it. I think being true to yourself is being, one, inquisitive enough about who you are as a person to figure out what makes you tick. What turns you on? What's the theme of what turns you on? Do you help people? Do you help yourself? What is it? Based on whatever that theme is, you got to live for that theme until you have a different idea about what your theme might be. You might start off one way and end up another, Now, what's interesting, I'm going to pause for 1 second on this chronological crawl here and go back to this show. So I've heard, before I made my own radio show with Kyle and then this show, I watched people respond who had channels to negative comments, and, you kind of cringe for them because you don't want anyone to have any, griefers in their life. And then, you're like, I wonder how I would respond to that whole thing. And, luckily, most of the stuff I put out is pretty well received. And it's almost... Well, there's two things to it. Yes, it doesn't hurt my feelings when someone says, I love the show, or I love the intro, or whatever it is. It doesn't feel bad. It feels good. Then when something negative comes through, there's all kinds of different levels of that. If someone really articulates why they think something is bad, you can have almost an enlightenment moment if you can see what they're saying, right? When people said, I love your show, but I listen to it. I have to listen to it around my children. Could you please not swear so much? I was like, yeah, I need to stop swearing so much, So I put an effort in because I agreed with their perspective, and it would be a shame to take the show away from someone because I can't control my mouth. Now, I'll throw a couple here and there. I've already done it in this episode, but I try to keep that down to a bare minimum now. But the funny comments that, like there's the one that Val made just today, and there's the ones that came in on my first moon mission episodes, the moon hoax episodes. And the one that's easy to kind of minimize is someone coming in and just either being factually completely wrong, or you could see they're super deep in that denial phase of the information, right? We've got firsthand proof. We've got, I've got people that told me things, and people say they don't exist. It's like, whatever. I was there, you weren't. And it happens to connect with everything else the officials have said who've defected out of these groups. So in some cases, you just wipe your hands, boom, that's just never really affects you. You feel sorry for them up to a point, right? Then there's the comments like Val's, which is like, I'm going to take a crap on your show here, but I don't have the, I guess, wherewithal, or, I've seen a lot of great comments from this person, so it's weird for me that she didn't describe why she thought it was a disaster. And the reason why my friends and I laughed so hard on the phone with this comment was that we started making jokes about what would a disaster episode really be. It's like going to a restaurant and a couple things go wrong, or one thing goes wrong, and you go on Yelp and you give them 1 star. It's like, really, what's a 1-star experience at a restaurant? You puke your guts out when you come home because you got food poisoning. That's 1 star. Somebody lit you on fire. That's 1 star, But a disaster episode, it sounds like a 1 star to me, right? And I'm sitting there going, how could this be so bad that disaster is the phrase, right? So, people can have bad days and they just vent it on a comment. But it's interesting when you get that moment where you're being disapproved of, where you are normally not disapproved of. And I'm not talking about the show anymore, but it's just in life. Now, sometimes, you're breaking the rules. You're bending the rules. And like when you're a kid, when you break the rules and you don't get caught, and so you do it again and you don't get caught, and then the third time you get caught. And now you have already braced for impact. You might talk back to your parents and, you deny that you did it even though you did. You're in a feral state of survival, right? And so when that happens inside, you're not trying to satisfy the world. You're just trying to stay out of trouble. A few of you are friends with me on Facebook, and the only feed that I post at all is the Deep Mind episode, which you can join me from the locked Facebook group. I'll approve everybody who's a real person, no problem. And you will see the only feed that I have on Facebook, which are some of the really rare Cuban cigars that I smoke with my buddy Dave. That's it. That's the only, I have 2 other accounts. One's an old one and one's a new one. Nothing on them. There's like my profile stuff. Got some photos in there, but that's it. There's nothing in there. And so the thing is I used to post like crazy. I used to post a bunch of controversial stuff, and then I got the MK Ultra radio show, and I realized, oh my God, I can take all my negativity and put it in the MK Ultra Facebook page, which still exists, by the way. And then I realized, okay, I was getting so involved with the negativity that was just ruining my life. It was just like, not horribly, but it was just like, I don't want those epiphanies or those moments where I'm feeling bad. Who the hell wants that? And so I just stopped. And then I discovered Instagram, mainly because of my daughter. And other than the few females that constantly post their latest Amway products on there 24/7, which I immediately unfriend, the cool thing about Instagram was that people were posting about their lives. That was a bit of an improvement. That stuff still happens on Facebook, but you don't get to run your mouth a lot. I mean, you can, but I don't think anyone really reads it. You can put big giant paragraphs in there. My life was so much better than yours today. Facebook, it's all about that. I've traveled overseas. I've done this, and there's an innocent part of sharing that process, which is you're having such an exciting time, you want to share it. But deep down inside, I believe 1,000% it's, wow, I can't wait to have everybody envy me for doing this. And I've been guilty in the past as well. Of posting something, it's even me being stupid and posting things where I'm in really special places with special people. I usually try not to post that stuff because I don't think those other people want me to do that. But there's been some scenarios where it's totally cool, man. Post that up. It's great. But then when I thought about how it might make people feel, it's like, So I was doing the opposite. I was either trying to post to satisfy someone that is going to be amazed. Oh, that guy from high school, man, do you know where he went? He did this, that, and this. And then the other side was not posting it to make sure they don't have a bad feeling. I'm pleasing the world. I'm not doing what I want to do. Now, in the end, all I want to do is have backups of my photos. That's really where it's at. On my Instagram, it's all about just taking great photographs. That's all I want to do. I love photography, and I grew up with a professional photographer as a father. And so, I love film, and I've always been an artist, sketch, paint, digital. So composition is a real big deal to me. Color is a real big deal to me. I don't think I have a single photograph on my Instagram that I haven't filtered down with one of my special filters where I've jacked the colors in a way I love them. I want the photographs to feel out of this world, just to take you some other place. But first and foremost, these items satisfy me. And if you happen to like it, then great. If you don't like it, I don't care. I'll tell you a funny one. In the last 10 years or so that I've had my hair long, oh my God, people, I don't want to look like crap, right? So I really do check myself out from different angles, make sure I'm not losing my hair or something to the point where I'm, I'm a bald guy with a ponytail. Some people look great like that. I don't know. I've been very fortunate with my hair. But people will come up to me and say, oh, you would look so good with short hair. I'm like, well, that's your opinion, man. This makes me feel me. I never had long hair as a kid. I don't know why I never did it. I had long hair one time, sort of a Patrick Swayze thing back when he was doing his thing. I didn't like that guy's, I think he's a great person before he died, of course. But I didn't follow that guy at all. I had a girlfriend that loved Dirty Dancing. I had to watch way more times than I ever wanted to admit. But I was an 80s rocker kid. I loved all those 80s bands, but I never grew my hair out. It's weird. So when I did, it was like this kind of spiritual experience where I thought, man, this is me. And I'm sorry that so many friends that I know, probably 50% of the people I know are like, oh, you look so much better. I love your hair up and da-da-da-da. And I'm just kind of like, well, that's good because I'm going to keep my hair up. When I'm working, when I'm inside, when I got to bend down and work on something, it's like, keep my hair back up. But I don't do it for anybody. I do it for me. And I think it's interesting. There's probably some people that might sway me. If they can convince me that I would like it more, then we're on. We can go change things, right? But today we have this other virus, which is virtue signaling, which I cannot stand. I want to use a dirty word so bad right now. Whoever asked me not to swear, that moment was for you. But this whole thing of I'm going to show the world how virtuous I am. And I was going to make an episode fully dedicated to this, but I think you guys would be asleep in 15 minutes. So I'm just going to embed it inside this episode, which is this, I think it's nauseating habit of making everyone else's problems in the world your problems. And it's not to really give a crap about the problems. They probably do it to some extent, but it's like, my God, if there's anything bad going on in the world, they're on Facebook in 2 seconds. I really care about this, and I'm going to show you how much I care about it more than you do. And if you try to care about it more than me, I'm going to double care about it. It's just awful. I don't even know what words we have for it, but it's spare me your saving the universe theme of life, because I don't buy it, for one. And two, you can't do anything for the entire world. Work on your little circle, your little hemisphere, your little sphere of influence. Be a good shining example for society. Do something in your local world. Don't worry about a murder in Chicago, a shooting in El Paso. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Worry about you. I have someone I admire, and this person's an animal activist in her personal travels, which I totally respect. She has tons of animals that she helps, and I saw a post. It was like a secondhand post that she screen captured that someone made about her, then virtue signaling inside the post about how much they liked her because she was caring about the animals that are going to get threatened by this Dorian hurricane that's happening, that might hit the coast of Florida. It's over the Bahamas as of this recording right now. But I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, you screen captured someone blowing smoke up your hole about you being virtuous, and you screen captured it and you posted it on your Instagram to show the world how great you are. It's like, wow, what are you, President Trump? So-and-so said I was great today, Ugh. If you guys can hear that screaming possum in the background. So what are the advantages of you throwing down the gauntlet and saying, look, I have been a victim of this, because I think we all have. I mean, we all have. I just think you would have to be a really special child not to care about what other people think from the very, very beginning. And I do know some kids in my past that have been that way. But what do you get once you throw that away? I think you get an unbelievable rebirth. You get freedom. It's liberating beyond liberation for you to go, you know what? In order for me to stop caring about the rest of the world, I got to start caring about myself. I once got tested on this theory. So here I am preaching, hey, don't care about what anyone else thinks. But I violated this sanctuary of personal expression once, and I corrected for it. But I was dating a girl who I would come to pick her up to go hang out. We dated for several years, and she would be dressed in the weirdest stuff I'd ever seen anyone put on. Expensive stuff, granted, but like bizarre clothing. And it would be like heavier clothing than the weather was outside. So it was like, why are you all bundled up, man? It's like hot outside. What are you doing that for? And some of it was just strange looking. Part of me, I guess, just had a preference that was different than hers. And so part of me was like, look, we live in California. There's a lot of great, options here. There's a lot of beautiful people here. I don't really want to go out with the chick who's dressed in the clown outfit, some bizarre, weird thing. I mean, I'm telling you, I think you would agree it was at least extremely different. It took several years of getting past that moment, and it's like, I hate even saying it, but I was kind of like coaching her on people that she admired and saying, look, you really like those chicks, right? And you're like, yeah, okay, well then look at what they dress in. I mean, do you admire that, or you just admire who they are as a person? No, I like the way they dress. I was like, okay, I think that look really great on you, and it would complete your whole desire to be more like them because you admire them, not for any stupid reason, but because you really dig how they put themselves together. And she eventually found her own way in doing that. But in the end, I probably put out the flame a little bit for her own self-expression. And I'm not proud of that. And I kind of carry that with me in present day experiences to make sure that if I see someone kind of, going to the beat of their own drum, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. And man, in Southern California, what's awesome is this gets tested 24/7. You'd be driving in your car down in Los Angeles and some other big city, or even, Huntington Beach or whatever, and there'll be some kid who's all tricked out in the most bizarre clothing, right? And sometimes it's like the people put themselves together really, really well. And the second you see them, you're like, oh my God, that's cool. I'm way too old to dress like that. But if I was your age, I'd be right there next to you coming up with my own version of that, which was really what the 70s and the 80s were like. I've said it 100 times on different shows, but when you followed people in the 80s, it was, I'm going to copy you, and that means I got to do my own thing. Prince said it a couple times in interviews. He goes, if my fans follow me, if they worship me, they don't perm their hair and try to look like me. They find their own thing. And when they come in, we have a style that jives, but their hair is totally different than mine. Their clothing's totally different than mine. And they're learning about self-expression. They're digging deep inside of who they are. What colors do you like? What shapes do you like? That's what kind of clothes you're going to buy. How you comb your hair is a shape that you like, And you're going to have some winners and you're going to have some losers. So you're going to try things. I'll give you some examples. When I was in junior high, I used to go get my hair cut in a tiny little town eventually. When I got back to my hometown, and the barber would literally say, I got to call your dad to make sure it's okay that I do this to your hair. And he made the call one time. My dad was on this side of the phone. He goes, oh, you can do anything you want. Like, this is my kid, and he's really weird. So just do anything he wants, So, I would get like one side of my head shaved and the other pulled out. I did the stupid, at the time it was totally cool, but the whole rat tail thing that hung out of the back. I was doing all kinds of crazy things, coloring my hair, all this other crazy stuff. And, it was just, hey, if I wanted stripes inside the side of my head, that's what I did. And it was cool is my parents, again, they were very familiar with prioritizing themselves. So when I needed to prioritize myself, they were just like, I'm not taking you anywhere. You're not going to embarrass me. I don't go to the royal ball anytime soon. So yeah, just go ahead and do it. My mom, when I would go shopping for clothes, every mom tries to help their kid find clothing because you need help when you're young. By the time I hit my teens, she just was like, she'd just stand in the front of the store, and she'd watch the help try to help me, and she'd just start laughing, and eventually they'd give up, and they'd go over to talk to her, and she'd say, you just got to stand back. He's just going to find what he wants, and that's it, and he's really fast at doing it, too, so it's only going to take about 10, 15 minutes, and he'll be done, and that's the truth. So the benefit you get by wiping away this stupid worry about what other people think is you get to be yourself. And if you never have been yourself, and there's people out there that'll hear my voice that won't admit it, but that's the case. Okay, so it's a little slow every once in a while. I had stupid haircuts. I had stupid clothing, really stupid clothing. And, I'm glad there's no photographs to record those moments on the internet. Oh my God, I've got photographs in my house that are sort of important to keep, but my God, the way I was dressed, oh geez, just the worst. But then I went through it and I was like, yeah, I did that because it was the 90s. But now the other part of it is, I'm talking about sort of the lighter end of being yourself, your outer appearance, right? The bigger, more impactful example of this is who you are as a person. What do you care about? What do you not care about? How do you form your words? How do you form your sentences with your words? How do you build communication between two people? How much do you sit around, moaning about other people's problems? It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you don't say a prayer at night for people's lives to be better. It doesn't negate any of that. It's just, I'll tell you something that happens. I'm going to cut myself short there. One thing I noticed growing up in a really small town was that the older guys were really crass with what they said. And a lot of times pretty funny. And, I didn't grow up I grew up in a pretty colorblind town. We had, like I've told you several times, the black families in my town were, in some cases, royalty. The Mexicans or royalty. I mean, they owned the restaurants and they were our school teachers and their kids were fantastic. I mean, I'm talking about every race in our town. Like there's some of the kids would be all-stars, and just the nicest kids on planet Earth. One of my childhood idols in high school, was a guy named Randy Martinez. I mean, just an amazing guy. And so we now are, because of this whole I'm accusing everyone of being a racist thing, this whole virtue signaling Democrat horseshit that's going on. Everybody's on extra, let me extra prove to you I'm not racist, extra prove, that kind of stuff. But I grew up on Richard Pryor, man. And Richard Pryor was keeping us all in check by making sure that he wrote jokes about everyone's perspective of everyone else. And so in the end, he said everything that we were thinking, and he made it not hurt. And that was amazing. So that when we got together with his energy in the world, you could tell when I was a kid, I mean, it was like you could tell a racial joke in a room with that race, and they would tell a joke back the other way. Sometimes it's your race, sometimes it's their race, and vice versa. And we were all kind of like, we were way more together and bonded, because in the end, I'm not saying bringing this particular habit back, but I just want to give an example of people living truthfully and not worrying about what someone else thought, because we're all grown-ups. That was the other thing, right? But imagine you sat with a friend let's do today, 2019. I've got plenty of friends of every race you could possibly imagine. And let's say I sat there with them, and I don't tell jokes much, and I certainly don't tell racial jokes, but let's say I was that kind of guy. You couldn't even conceive of, put it this way, it's hard to conceive of having a conversation about racial differences today, because you don't want to offend the other person, because they have been taught by this Democratic Party globalist fucking group of people that as soon as you offend someone, oh my God, it's how much can I give you to say I'm sorry? Here's my house, deed, and here's my car keys, and here's my wife. I hope that's enough, But back in the 70s, it was awesome. You would sit in a room with everybody from all these different walks of life, and you could tell a joke. And I was always the little kid watching this happen, so I'm not trying to put myself in the middle of actually being able to do this personally, but if I saw the jokes go on, and again, they didn't hurt. Nobody was trying to be mean, everything was kind of funny, and it was so stupid. The stupid white jokes, the stupid black jokes, stupid Chinese jokes, or whatever it was. It would go into the room, everybody would laugh, and here's the thing. Because we could all laugh at each other and ourselves, the amount of forever life bonding that these people had and still have to this day is infinite. If anybody in the room needed anything from anyone else, everybody was there. If your car didn't work, well, I got that other car. Why don't you just drive that until we all work on your car and get it fixed? Boom. We're all a community. We all work together. And there was a time to tell jokes, and there was a time not to tell jokes. And it was beautiful. Everyone was being themselves. We didn't have social media. If you wanted to be at the party, you had to go to the party. And how do you get invited to the party? You couldn't be a fake person, because who wants that person around? You couldn't talk about yourself all the time. So we learned social etiquette with each other, and there wasn't a credit system, penalizing us if we didn't. We would kind of faux pas, and someone would look at you kind of funny, like, really? You just said that? Yeah, that was dumb, wasn't it? Yeah, that was pretty bad. It's okay, you get a pass. We know what you meant. Now, relax and be yourself. If you really thought you had a problem with us, we'd sit you down and talk it out of you. But you're just trying to be funny. We've all had that person in the room that is trying to be the funniest person in the room. I've definitely been guilty of this with my closest friends. And what you find out is that you talk too much, and you're trying to tell a joke every time something occurs to you, and in the end, you'll say a couple doozies every once in a while that no one will be able to erase, and especially you won't be able to erase it. And you'll find out that the moment you do that, you weren't being genuine to who you are. You should have just sat there and just, Enjoy the silence with everyone else while you're watching a movie or watching TV or doing whatever the hell's going on. Don't try to fill up the blank space all the time. But the other one is this little scenario that happens every once in a while where it usually ends with a phrase that's something like this. Well, I didn't know that's what you really thought. You were doing this. Why did you say that if this is what you really thought? And the other person says, oh, I thought that's what you wanted to hear. Well, it's not what I wanted to hear. I want to hear what you think. And when you raise kids, this happens to you in this coveted, it happens all the time when you raise your kids. Your kids are trying to please you, and they'll, sometimes you can see right through it, and you can warm up to them and say, I know you don't want to do that. That's fine. You don't have to do that. It's cool. But thanks for thinking about me or thinking about the family or whatever it is. I appreciate that. And then they're like, oh my God, I can be myself. You're like, yeah. But sometimes, the key point that happened to me with my kid was this, what are you going to be when you grow up sort of thing. High school's coming to an end and you got to figure out what you want to be in life. And they're, some kids are really good. They can really bond with their parents during those experiences. Well, help me out. I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that, but I haven't met that kid. So if that's something, maybe I was that kid because I was like, Dad, I need a computer. And he's like, okay. So-and-so want a computer from Radio Shack. I'm going to buy it off him for $50. I'm going to give it to you, and you do what you do. I don't really have any interest in that, so you do your own thing. And that worked for me. It was cool. My kid really stressed. She really stressed about my opinion of her job. And it started innocently where she was telling me about one of the low-hanging fruit things you can do in California is become a nurse. Nurses are great. Nurses are wonderful. I love them, especially when I need them, and they're amazing at what they do. But we know what happens to nurses in this world. They get vaccinated to death. And I don't want my kid vaccinated for any reason whatsoever. And so I told her, I said, just be careful about that. They have to take like dozens of vaccinations a year, every year. You're going to have your rotted brain by the time you get to my age. And I don't think you want to make a forever decision like that before you understand the implications of what those things are. Now, you don't believe me, all my conspiracies about that stuff, having worked in pharma, still have to earn that whole thing. And so she's stressed. Is the next thing I bring to my dad the thing that he's going to crap on? In her brain, that's what I was doing. I was saying, you're making a bad decision. Well, it's not what I was saying at all. I really wish they'd leave these nurses alone, let them pick what they want to be vaccinated by and not make it an imperative to keep their job. I still think that's ridiculous. I have a friend of mine who aced radiology school, and he became a radiologist. And when it came down that he's going to have to take some ungodly amount of vaccinations, he resigned out of active duty as a radiologist, and he went into the IT department of radiology, which has no customer-facing element, thus came off his requirement to take vaccinations. And what a sacrifice he made to protect his health. I gets an A+ for the life that he lives, So you can have these tight relationships with your kids where they want to do right by you, and they may even really respect your opinion, but they also have their own interests and their own lusts for things, and so they get kind of worried, Again, I've said this several times on different shows, but there used to be this thing in the 80s when kids would tell their parents they want to become actors or comedians or singers. The parents just immediately roll their eyes because those aren't real careers. You got to have a fallback thing that you do. And ironically enough, tons of the people that are considered famous today from my generation, not from the current generation. I don't know anything about the current generation, but a lot of them have degrees, and full fallback careers. Every one of the Pythons had fallback careers, and one of them was a doctor. Didn't David Bowie have a degree in accounting or something? And all these guys had something they went through formally, and then they simply fell into their career. So they didn't have that rub. They satisfied the fallback plan that perhaps their parents imposed on them, and then they finally fell into what they love. All right. Do what you got to do, man. You can still be yourself and create a fallback career. No problem with that whatsoever. Graham Chapman was the guy's name for Monty Python. With the Great Awakening, we have plenty of subjects that people get ridiculed for, and people still hold their own. If I'm not a flat earther, I have to say that because if I don't, I get a bunch of hate mail. I respect flat earthers for multiple reasons that I've mentioned several times on the show, but one of the biggest reasons is they're being true to themselves. You think it's easy walking around telling people you think a round ball is flat? That takes some balls, man. And they're holding their own. And, again, NASA's no help in figuring out what it is. But I have to say, reading about the NROC foundations that are using satellites to control the world, if you don't believe satellites exist, you may be being set up for a major sucker play. When, like Skynet finally launches, you're like, well, those things don't exist. Oh, yeah, motherfucker. Boom. You're dead. I'm glad you didn't believe in that up to that moment. I don't think people launch rockets just to see them go up in the air. I honestly don't. We do. They don't. But the Great Awakening tests everybody. For those of you who are huge Q enthusiasts and you think the plan's going to happen, it's rough, right? You have had your constitution tested. And the only thing you can do is really run back online and find people exactly like you, or filter out your friends that don't believe in what you believe and only stick with those people. That is a very real thing when it comes to being who you are. If you're extremely religious, it happens all the time, right? You stick with your religious friends. Now, the caution for everybody, not just religious people, is that, we talk about becoming a well-rounded person. And part of that is always a comment that accompanies education. You really want to learn as much as you possibly can about how the world works, from how it works technically to how it works sociologically. You have your own personal laboratory, which is your own mind, and so that's your psychological playground. And so you do want to stay, well, I'll put it this way. If you want to truly become who you are, then part of it would be, I'll give you a weird analogy. Let's say you grew up in the Midwest and you're still there today, or in some rural area wherever you live in the world. And your rural area does not have exotic food of any kind. You barely have ever seen sushi, and you've barely ever eaten, let's say, Indian food. But, you're like, your friends drag you to that restaurant, you go on a vacation, and everyone else is eating it, or it's the only thing that's being served, and you're kind of freaked out now because you're like, man, I don't know what I like. I don't like raw this and raw that. The reality is if you like fish at all, this is what I told my kid when she was sort of hesitant to eat sushi, because she'd always get like the teriyaki chicken or whatever. Now she's addicted to sushi, and I warned her when she was a kid. I said, I think it's great you don't like sushi, because I don't want to pay for your meal eating sushi because it's always super duper expensive, and I was joking, of course. And now she loves it, and now she's got to find places she can afford as a teacher, to eat that kind of stuff. Indian food, same thing. We have the two famous dishes in America that we eat of Indian food, and I think at least one of them exclusively was a kind of a British American creation, meaning it was created in Britain and we love it, which is tandoori chicken. Anybody who doesn't like or doesn't know anything about Indian food could always eat tandoori chicken, because it's just chicken, it's seasoned. There's no sauce on it or nothing bizarre. It's not super hot or anything like that. But the other one is chicken tikka masala, which has a thick sauce. It's chicken, but that sauce can be made, 2 million Scoville hot. I mean, they can make that stuff so hot, it'll burn your brains out. So it's a little bit of a riskier dish. You have to tell them, don't make it too hot. You don't like hot food. If you like hot food, brace yourself. You better be a hot pepper fan. But now, how cool would it be? Let's say you eat some sushi and you dig it, and you eat some Indian food and you like it. Okay, good. This is a metaphor for education and how the world works. How cool would it be to sit down with a master sushi chef or a master Indian food cuisine chef, and you say, I want to try your food. I want to find more than just these couple dishes or these couple pieces of sushi that I like. But I don't want to eat something that's going to make me throw up. And I have a texture thing or whatever your deal is. I don't like super salty things or whatever it is. And the chef sits with you and goes, okay, well, tell me all the other food in the world that you like. Hamburgers, hot dogs, steaks, baked potatoes. Do you like butter? Do you like salt? Do you like sugar? And they ask you, they interview you with all these different questions. And they're like, you know what? I know exactly what you would like on my menu. And they go fetch little samples of it. And they give you a spoon or whatever it takes to eat it. And you eat it. And they're like, this should be like eating a steak. And you're like, pow, oh my God, you're right. You're in a sushi world. They're like, well, do you like shrimp? Yeah, have you ever had any shrimp sushi? No, oh my God, no. Let me go get it for you. This shrimp is actually cooked. Poof. There's one more dish that when you go out to a sushi restaurant, you don't have to look like a neophyte eating California rolls every time you sit down, right? The reason why the body likes sushi is that raw food is how we ate food for a really long time before we learned how to put it on a fire. And so there's this natural ability to completely dig it. Fish eggs and that kind of stuff, maybe it's not your game. I remember first time I was 18 years old, just moved to California. My boss loved sushi. I was terrified of it, man. Utterly terrified. And he said, get me cucumber rolls, it's cucumbers wrapped in rice and seaweed. I'm like, that tastes good. And he gave me some salmon. Oh, yeah, that's pretty good. But he said, have you ever had a quail egg? And I said, oh my God, no. Oh my God. I ate plenty of like normal eggs. And the idea of like seeing Rocky Balboa drink a whole glass of raw eggs just gagged me. So I thought, this is going to be horrible. And so he goes, here. I forgot how they did it. It was like in a shot of sake or something, which I also hadn't had, but I wasn't afraid of sake. He goes, they're going to put the quail egg on top of this little sake thing, and you're going to drink it. It's going to go in your mouth. And he said, just do this. He just says, push the quail egg, which is teeny tiny, man. Push it on the roof of your mouth and pop it. And the whole thing is just gagging me and just thinking about it, back when I was 18. So I'm like, okay, I probably had a little bit of sake to soften the blow. Put it in there, popped it on the roof of my mouth. It was the most silky, amazing thing, almost no taste whatsoever, but it was the texture that was just out of this world. And so now I'm like, oh my God, I can eat quail eggs. And it gave me personal power moving forward with sushi. And I will say that the thing that broke me was I moved to the Bay Area because I hadn't eaten sushi much in the Southern California region. I moved to the Bay Area for 12 years. My buddy said, let's go eat some sushi. I'm like, I don't like sushi. He's like, come on. They make you like California rolls? I'm like, I guess, whatever. And it was a master sushi chef who actually lived half of his life in America, in Burlingame, and half of it in, this place still exists. It's called Sakai Sushi, Sake Sushi. It's right off Burlingame Avenue if you guys live up there. Most amazing sushi ever. But at least he did spend 20 years ago, 6 months of his life, roughly, in Japan teaching the art of creating sushi. And he'd bring his star students over to cook at his restaurant. Not cook, but, just assemble sushi. And it was just brilliant. You watch these guys do it. And so that guy knew I was hesitant and started just upgrading one dish after another. And I was like, oh my God, now I'm totally addicted to this stuff. And it was expensive as hell, right? I give you that little story so that you do branch out a little bit as you're trying to define who you are. Let me give you the devil's advocate version of this too. This isn't necessarily bad because you own your own life and screw everybody else. But I'll just put it this way. Social media. Got on Facebook, I think 2009, because a friend of mine, old boss of mine, said, hey man, come get me on Facebook. And I was like, okay. I hadn't seen him in a long time, so I did it, and there you go. It took me years to delete all my posts after I decided to get rid of them all. I got on there, and of course, it took my class of 87 forever to figure out the internet. 88 was on the internet in 2 seconds. I don't know what the hell the difference was between the 2 years, or between the 1 year. It just made all the difference in the world. But my class took forever to get online. So as people would come online, uploading a profile pic was a pretty monumental technical task for them when they first got on there. And some of the people would upload a photograph, and it looked like they had uploaded a photograph from high school. And at first you're thinking, well, they probably don't have a lot of photographs scanned in the computer. They're not, they don't have digital whatever. They don't have selfies or whatever. They're living in Kansas, so whatever. They're probably back 10, 20 years plus. And then I discovered one of the most profound 80s photographs that I had ever seen online was a current day picture. We're talking about a haircut that went out of style, probably 1989. Clothing, like acid wash clothing, still being worn as if it was right off the shelf. Now it's kind of coming back, right? Which is kind of funny. Just stick to it, and eventually in 3 decades, your look will come back. But I remember looking at this photograph going, oh my God, this person has been literally in a bubble for 30 years, 20 years at least, right? Probably 20 years, yeah. And so it kind of saddened me because I was thinking, oh my God, this person really never went anywhere in their brain. And forget about having to travel everywhere. You don't need to go anywhere if you don't want to. But because I'm such a, hey man, you're full of all kinds of potential kind of guy, and I've never been wrong about that. Once you start working with people, they go to once you believe in them, and if you're lucky enough to observe them and then prove to them that they have all these major skills, then they start to feel it. It just becomes a vibe, and they break out of their shell and they go do amazing things. So I had, that was a weird, interesting social experiment to see everybody come online. And then eventually that hair changed and things changed. So they started seeing the rest of the world. And maybe it was a tiny bit of pleasing other people to kind of branch out a little bit. One of the funny arcs that happens, and it happens to all of us in real life, but it happens in movies all the time. How many movies have you seen where they take a really beautiful woman or girl, depending on what kind of movie you're watching, and they dress her down. They put the stupidest haircut on her. They just did this when I was watching Glow, believe it or not. But they keep someone looking horrid the whole show. And eventually, third act comes around, and they do a makeover, and then pop, that person that the studio knows is utterly gorgeous, that's why they were hired to do the part, pops out, wears the prom dress, whatever, puts on the nightgown or whatever, and the scene just explodes. And everyone's like, oh my God, I knew she was pretty, and da-da-da, and it's cool. And so you get that amazing gratification by reinventing yourself. So the sort of catch-22 with this algorithm is that if you are pretty successful in reinventing yourself, and I got a whole episode on that if you're interested, go to deepthoughtsradio.com, click the search field, just type the word reinvent, you'll get the episode, is that you will most likely get a lot of positive reaction, at least from some people. Another example of that, as I'm riffing this cigar to death, in the 90s, I really got into music and started just creating instrumental albums as I was figuring out how to write music. And I would, pass cassettes around to friends and definitely send them out to my family members. And I was immaturely looking for praise from this effort. And what ended up occurring was that, relatives and stuff, they'll say it's nice just because, and who knows if they really liked it or not. But the interesting thing was with friends, they're a little bit more honest and brutal, which is great. And I worked really hard on the music, so it's not crap necessarily, but I would make an album of at least 10 songs. And there's 10 songs, and so they don't have to like all of them. But what ended up occurring is that I found out that the reviews would come back, and someone would say they loved a song. And they would say they played it 100 times in their car, but they would never compliment any of the other tunes. And so I'd ask a couple of my closest friends, what did you think about the other ones? Oh, they were okay. And then the funny thing was, I talked to a different friend. One of them was one of the most profound experiences I had was that I gave it to my first boss in the Bay Area, gave the latest album I made, and I gave it to him, and he took it home and then came back to work. And this is my boss, so it's kind of like I want him to like me. He had just gotten the job the same day I got the job, so we were both first-timers into the company. So we didn't have any kind of, weird, I'm more senior than you kind of thing. He was my boss, and I respected him for that. But he said, Because he waited the whole day. He didn't say anything at all until the whole day, and I wasn't even thinking about it. But he stops me right before he left for the day, and he goes, I just want to tell you about that album. He says, I put that thing on, and he had a brand new wife. And he put it on, and he said, we made love to that album all night long. And he goes, we just kept it looping the whole time. It was a long album, so the guy was pretty busy. But he says, there's that one tune, that one tune, I think it was called, like, some stupid name, like Alien Arrival or some weird thing like that. But it was this, synthy tune I made. And he goes, that was the one. He goes, that just sent us over the cliff of ecstasy or whatever the hell it was, right? And I remember thinking about that, going, geez, what that told me was that there's always an audience, as long as you put your heart in it, right? I'm not making music in a studio thinking about my boss that I'm not going to have for 3 or 4 years having hot sex with his wife. I'm not thinking about that. I'm making music that I like to hear. And if I don't like it, it doesn't go on the album. It just becomes a trashy little track off to the side. But the ones I dug, I polished them up as much as I could with the memory I had on my keyboard and get them out the door. So know that as you reinvent yourself, if you have been victim to this whole please the world thing, you're going to have fans that you never had before. And you're going to have people that have grown accustomed to this weird persona that you have that are going to not like the new person necessarily, but they may get used to you after a while. And while we're talking about persona, you'll hear me mention on the episode a lot the kind of Freudian Russian doll theory of how the brain works. The outermost shell is your persona. It is who you pretend to be in front of people that you don't know. And then you have your character underneath that, and that is who you really are. And then you have your ego in the dead center, which is essentially your subconscious child who's always weird and fearful and bizarre and chaotic, right? I don't think that's what's really going on necessarily, but I do believe in a character and a persona for sure. We all feel it. The easiest way for me to define a persona activity is if you are empathetic towards older people. Let's say people over 70 or even over 80. They're more, relaxed in their life. Perhaps they're more sweet and simple because they don't have any battles to fight anymore. And, you meet an old woman in her 80s or 90s, you immediately go into that lovable version of yourself because that's sort of the persona of the room. They're that way naturally. You're not that way because you grew up in this world with terrorism and all this other crap. And so you end up being kind of softer. And you definitely watch your language, and you don't talk about the things that are interesting to you. You talk about the things that are interesting to them. And if they ask you about your life, you go into it, but it's all very guarded. And then there's your character, or when you go home and there's no one else around, you're in your car and there's no one else in the car with you, you are who you are. Now, there's probably a mezzanine, a middle line between your persona and your character that is who you probably really want to be. You want to be nicer. You want to swear less. This is definitely the case for me. And so you kind of ebb your whole life to this zone, and probably the only thing that happens in your later years is you might just go, okay, wherever I am right now between my character and my persona, that's who I am. I got no more time to architect who I am as a human being. I'm just trying to stay breathing every day. I'm trying not to fall down and break my hip, right? And age is also an extremely humbling experience. I made an episode about getting older, and if you are interested in that subject matter, you might go look up that episode as well. But as you choose this sort of beacon in your mind about how far you want to go in any one direction, if you're trying to be who you are, you need to find out who that is. One of the things I mentioned several times on shows is that, guys will typically be single for large stretches of their life. It's just the way it is. But women, in America at least, are trained, whether or not they do this or not, and I'm going to give some compliments out to the ladies, so don't worry if I sound like I'm criticizing women for a second. But they are taught in this world, in this country of America, the second you start dating as a child, other children, hopefully, you're never to be single ever again. You are to date all the way up to marriage and get married pretty much as quick as possible. It used to be, at least. And then you are to, if you get divorced, boy, you're supposed to be dating immediately and then get married as quick as you can. Because if you don't get married, if you're not with someone else, and this is the psychosis that's behind most of the posts on the internet with women that I see, and some men do it too, but they know they're kind of being a little fruity when they get into this algorithm. But it's to say, look at me, look how loved I am. I am not broken. And the sad thing about that whole journey is that they have no clue who they are. And any man that can't find 6 months to 2 years of singlehood, they also don't know who they are most of the time. Most of the time, they have no clue. They might think they know. I don't mean to be cynical about people who do know, because if you know, you know. But usually it's all about pleasing the other person. That's how you can stay in a relationship constantly, unless you're super lucky and you find your soulmate, as they say, which is a word we usually associate with, hey man, everything's working out. I get to be myself and they're themselves and we just click. Amen. You're the luckiest person on planet Earth, and I salute you 1,000%. But I know a number of the females that watch this show. They've contacted me over the years here and there, and they're not looking for a relationship. They're not looking to sweet talk me or anything like that. And what's interesting about almost every woman that I talk to who has been a part of this show as a listener and participating in all the social media and comments and guiding episodes is that they do have giant moments where they prefer to be by themselves. They end a relationship and they're like, you know what I need right now is some me time. And they are just the most strong, well-adjusted people. And it's funny because the catch-22 is they become so attractive to people like me who are just like, man, if I ask you, if my life would be interesting to you, whatever answer you come up with, to the degree I inform you about my life, honestly, I can trust your answer because you know who the hell you are. And guys, we got to make sure we know who we are. It doesn't mean, who you were yesterday. Maybe you don't like who you were. Maybe it felt good, but it didn't feel genuine. And I think that's a huge guiding principle of what we're talking about here. You know the word genuine. And sometimes it's very difficult to put into words what is genuine, what makes you feel genuine. But you don't have to put it into words. You just know when you're being genuine to yourself. And it feels good, man. It feels empowering because you are taking care of number one. If you are a person who's susceptible to helping people because that's your theme in life, then you sort of have an enemy inside you. As much as it is a virtue, it's sort of an enemy as well. When I first moved to California, I guess I should mention names just in case this person doesn't want this revealed about them, although it's an endearing quality. My boss at the time, he was known for, I talked to some of his associates. I was 17, just barely 18 at the time when I started working for him. And they said, his biggest downfall is that he can't say no to anyone. And at first I thought that was just a business thing. And eventually I learned that he was just a super nice guy. And they said he gets overwhelmed. He says yes to everyone out there who wants to engage in his business, and he can't possibly fulfill all those yeses. And so it was tearing the company apart. And he's still in business, and he still does exactly what he did when I moved here 32 years ago. As far as I know. Still named after him anyway. And so if you are a person that is super empathetic and you do find yourself mourning over everyone else's losses in the world, if that's your problem in not being who you are and not taking care of number one, it's like I almost want to say, this is sort of a weird narcissistic sounding thing to say, but it's not. I give you permission to just care about yourself. Sometimes that's all the words you need to hear. you can just take care of yourself. Now, if you have kids and stuff, I'm not talking about ignoring your children, but it's also very important that mommy or daddy is satisfied in who they are as a person, because it will bleed through to everything that you do with everyone else in your life, especially your lovers. And to the degree you can communicate these things in words to your family, it's huge. You know, I did an episode on parenthood back in season 1, and it's funny. It has very low views. You can watch the remastered one on the deepthoughtsradio.com. But some of the comments I got and personal communications I got from these people, from people who watched it, several fathers that came to me and said, you know what? I had not been communicating with my kids about where I was in the world and what was bothering me, and I realized I could. And one guy, I believe he had a couple daughters, and he said, I sat my daughters down and I just simply told them where I am in life, and then I'm going to need a little bit of dad time. I'm going to be in the house. You can always get me when you need me, and I'll be your protector and all that good stuff. But if I'm in my room and I'm in my office or whatever working on something, don't take it personal. I'm just enlightening myself with some new knowledge that's going to help me get a better job, and we're going to have more fun if I have a better job because I'll be happier. I may have more money and that kind of thing. And he said, I did it, and my kids completely got it, and all that tension left the family, all that subliminal anger feeling, like the kids were like, is it my fault that dad is not happy? And that it all went away automatically, right? So if you are finding yourself, you know, neck deep in this algorithm, and you're like, man, yeah, I gotta do something about this, you know, and there's nothing I can do to necessarily help you personally, but you're going to re-engineer yourself. You're going to make your decisions based on what you love in this world. And you know what, again, you're going to experiment sometimes. Sometimes you don't know, and you're going to try that, and you're, well, I thought I liked that. I guess I don't. You may even come right back to where you were and say, you know what, who I was is exactly who I want to be, but now I know it. Now when I do this thing that I thought was my persona, I understand it's actually more of my character. It's more genuine to me. And that's super empowering, man. I'll tell you one little trick that some of you will be able to take advantage of. And there's several of you out there because you talk to me on the side. Some of you are writers. Dennis, this is for you. You're writers, and you are, you know, all of us are stuck in some form of constraint in life, you know, like I can't just pick up and go anywhere on the whole planet that I want to go. I can't just do everything I want to do. So I'm pining for certain careers and certain things. But one thing you can do, if you have this deep yearning for something that is somewhat inaccessible, or maybe 100% inaccessible, is to write fiction. Write a story about that other person. And here's the cool thing. One, you get to archetype your whole, or architect, I should say, an architect, an archetype, I like that, this fantasy world that you think might be something you would be interested in. And then eventually you'll find out that's what I want to do. And you can become that character. Character being the key word. Really become more like that fictional person you created. So Prince always said, he goes, I acted the way I wanted my life to be, and it happened. He projected, he attracted. Law of attraction. But if you find out that's not someone you'd ever want to be, you even finish the book or the screenplay or whatever, and you're like, man, I'm so glad I'm not that person. You know, I'll tell you a little story that, you know, transformed me with the screenplay I was working on. I saw the movie The Professional. It's called Leon in Europe. Amazing story about the hitman. I mentioned it several times on the show. Most of you have probably already seen it. And I loved the genuine sort of gritty nature of that screenplay. So I thought, you know, but I also saw, you know, all these Mission Impossibles, The Bourne Identity, all these other things in the Tom Cruise movies that are sort of like that. Where they're individual badasses or whatever, usually fighting for good. And so I had created this sort of hitman superhero, not capey superhero, like a very real person. And I had this scenario for him, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to write all these really cool scenes that were going to be these, you know, bad, you know, good at conquering evil kind of scenes, but still, I was younger when I did this, probably 20 years ago. I was really pushing this together. But eventually, after I went for the script and I really tried to develop the character, what I figured out was that world was so utterly dark. No matter how much I tried to spin it positive, it disgusted me after a while, and I dropped it. I was like, I don't want to bring that reality into this world, even if I can make $1 billion off of it. I don't want to be known for creating that kind of influence on people to worship anybody who would do such a thing, whether it be good or bad. It was interesting. And it changed who I was. It made me appreciate the fact I don't live in those worlds. We talk a lot about, the people that control the planet. And usually at some point in your research about that upper tier of people that have all the mansions and all the planes and they get to do anything that they want and all the horrible things that they do, even the ones that don't do horrible things, you might see them in Morocco or Monaco and wherever, some Paris or whatever famous place you think you would love to be, driving cars you think you want to have, and living in these, and they rent a whole floor of a hotel or whatever, and you think you want to be those people. But in the end, when you really study it, you're like, man, I would never want to be one of those people. You always got a target on your back. You're always you're neurotic about your losing power and money, and it's just a horrible, horrible life to live. I would take a porch, a block of wood, and a knife, and a pair of overalls and a rocking chair any day over their lives. Personally, I would love to end my life that way. Got my old dirty fishing pole. My woman's making lemonade. So, after she had a very long, satisfying day herself. So in closing, let me just say, the world will be a much better place the more that we figure out who we are as people and stop trying to please everybody else. If you find yourself sort of, I would almost say, a victim of this circumstance where you do look at your Facebook feed and you're like, my God, 80-90% of my posts are really me trying to pretend to the world my life is this perfect thing, and that's sort of the gratification I'm looking for with my posts. You can always delete your posts, and you can always refresh who you are as a person. What I love to see in people's posts personally is, and I have a couple, probably a half a dozen friends in this area that do it beautifully, is they share their life. They share their fun times with their wives and their kids, and graduation or birthday or Christmas or something like that. And that is, for me, the essence of who we are as people. It's and even someone that says, man, I just picture of a wrecked car, and they're like, Jesus, someone just hit my car. I rear-ended somebody, or my tire blew this morning, or I woke up, my engine wouldn't start. You're looking for some support from the rest of us. That's life too. That's real life. And it doesn't mean you're a sinner if you post about going to a real exotic place and you're like, this has been my life dream to see the pyramids, post that crap, just add a little bit of context so we know why you're doing it. And we'll all be right behind you, cheering you on and being happy about it. These are my personal opinions. I don't mean to offend anyone who believes completely different about it. But just make sure you're being genuine with yourself. That's my advice. Hope you feel me. So, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, as I keep saying, it's been spiffed up a little bit. Works good on the phone, works good on your computer. There's a search field, there's a category list. I'll make it fairly short today. There's 2 feeds for video, 2 feeds for audio. BitChute's a little bit behind, just in case you're looking over there and going, why am I missing a bunch of episodes? It's going to be a job getting the season 4 up there. We have 2 social medias, one that really has conversation, one that just has the feed in case you're a big Twitter person. We have 2 ways to donate to the show. We have the all remastered season 1, so if you go to this channel and you're looking for episode 100 or before, they're not there because I have unlisted them. If they're embedded anywhere else in the world, they will still work, but if you want to see the true season 1 remastered, way better audio levels, a lot of editing to make things better, there's a link up there to the other YouTube channel. So click that. Subscribe just so you have it in your feed. There's 100 episodes you have to get through. But it's good. And I will tell you this. One cool thing about being the author of the show is that people will post those posts where they are in a state of need, or they're just being inquisitive about something. Well, what about this? What do you guys think about this? And I will have done an episode on it. And if they're a close friend of mine, I will either private chat them, or if I think it's a real benign episode where a lot of people could ingest it and it's going to be cool, I put the thing in the reply. And I've had some really good successes with that. People saying, oh my God, this made my day. I just needed to talk to someone about it, and you had an hour and a half about it. So just know that within the arsenal of deep thoughts, especially if you're new to the channel, type keywords into the website that are interesting to you, and you'll find that I've already done episodes on it. And you may or may not agree, but remember this: if you're new to the channel, one of the things I always tell the listeners is, even if you disagree with absolutely everything I said, even in this episode, the beautiful benefit of disagreeing with me 100% is that you find out what you really think 100%, or more towards 100% than where you were before you started the episode. So there's a benefit to both sides of the equation, in my opinion. Food for thought. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.